Pero nabuo sa akin yung siguro yung value ng pakikiisa, yung solidarity. Dahil lampas sa pamilya ko, actually kahit sa pamilya ko merong epekto, pero lampas din sa pamilya ko yung iba pang naapektuhan. No? At siguro yun po yung pretext ng tatlong aral na natutunan ko from martial law history. No, mahalagang magkaroon ng malasakit ng pakikiisa sa mga taong naabuso, na torture, mga ninakawan dahil sa diktatorya. So yung una pong aral na natutunan ko ay yung we as ordinary people have the power to be the change we want to see. No, at siguro po yung we try to live this out po yung value po na ito sa mga ginagawa po namin ngayong pandemya. No, so kasama po namin sa pagkilos yung mga volunteers po sa Citizens Budget Tracker. So kami po ay isang komunidad ng mga inaaral budget. Nagsimula po siya dahil nung nag-start yung pandemya, hindi po makakuha ng PPE, ng mga mask, yung aking mga kapamilya na frontliner sa probinsya. And while gumawa kami ng volunteer initiative, gumawa kami ng sponsors para mabigyan sila ng mga mask at mga gloves at mga PPE, no? Yung sunod na tanong, mas mahalaga. May budget para rito. At hindi ba binayaran natin yan dahil sa buwis na binayad natin? At nagsimula lang siya, yung isang budget tracker, sa isang napakaliit na aksyon. Nag-post lang sa Facebook, humihingi ng tulong. No, meron po bang gumagawa ng tracker tungkol sa COVID-19 spending ng ating halaan? At nung nalaman ko na wala, sige, gawa tayo in 24 hours ng isang spreadsheet. No? Simple lang siya, Google Sheet. So lahat ng mga publicly available na information tungkol sa budget, trinay ko pong ikalap, no? At pinost po ulit sa Facebook. Medyo nag-viral po yun. Hindi ko po maintindihan kung bakit parang isang bagay na medyo boring, di ba, budget. Maraming tao yung interesado tungkol sa budget. At lumago lang po siya ng lumago dahil patuloy lang po kaming humingi ng tulong. No, nung humingi po kami ng tulong sa mga auditor at accountant para i-check yung mga records, may tumugon. Nung humingi po kami ng tulong sa mga graphic artists na gumawa ng website para maging less intimidating, para mas mabasa yung budget, may tumugon. Nung humingi kami ng tulong sa mga lawyers at abogado, check kung legally sound ba, no, kung tama ba yung nilalagay naming information tungkol sa batas, may tumugon. At patuloy lang siya sa movement na to. No? Humingi kami ng tulong, may tumugon. At naging movement po siya at our largest, no, around 60 plus po yata kami na community members and volunteers na nagtatrack ng budget. At ngayon po ay nakita po namin na hindi mga sinasabi, no, na walang pera yung gobyerno. No, in fact, maraming pera yung gobyerno. 5 trillion pesos po yung national budget natin every year. Pero bakit wala pang testing? Bakit kulang yung testing? Bakit kulang yung PPE para sa mga kapamilya ko na dapat pinoprotektahan nga ng pamahalaan? No? At very inspired po kami ng mga naunang movements tulad ng NAMFREL, no, yung National Movement for Elections, at yung mga tao na sa COMELEC na tumindig nung nagkaroon ng dayaan sa eleksyon. No? At kami po, tinatry po namin as much as possible na matuto dito sa kasaysayan na to at makiisa doon sa mga taong siguro who found the courage to stand up. No, nung pinasara yung ABS-CBN, nag-request sila ng interview. Hindi namin hinayaan na matakot kami. Patuloy kaming nagpa-interview sa ABS-CBN. Yung humingi ng interview yung Rappler tungkol sa budget, patuloy pa rin kami nag-i-engage sa Rappler. Noong nangyari yung formally investigations, inaral po namin kung bakit isa sila sa mga kumpanya, no, na talagang walang financial capacity, no, para gawin yung mga kontrata or i-fulfill yung mga kontrata para sa PPE. At sila pa rin isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit yung mga kapamilya ko hindi nakakuha ng proteksyon na deserve nila, no, sa pamahalaan. And we stood, no, and we gave our inputs doon po sa Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, no, para imbestigahan, no, yung formally given the publicly available information that we have. So nakakuha po kami ng lakas doon sa yan, no, at marami po dito sa mga kasama namin ay naging active din noong panahon ng people power. At sana po dito sa Citizens Budget Tracker nagkakaroon din kami ng lakas, no, yung ordinary people, yung ordinaryong mamamayan, merong lakas at kapangyarihan na maging pagbabago na gusto naming makita. And that's how we're pushing po dito. So yun po yung unang aral. Yung pangalawang aral po ay to keep on organizing, no? Organize. At yung isa po sa mga pinaka tumatak sa akin, no, sa journey ko of siguro trying to be an active citizen, which is a lifelong journey. Araw-araw we try to continue to engage, no? Pero maraming nagsasabi na walang pag-asa yung Pilipinas. And people point to siguro yung vested interests, no, yung sinusuhulan yung mga kongresista, no, sinusuhulan yung mga tao sa gobyerno para ma-ensure na meron silang cut, no, na meron silang patong, no, doon sa mga kontrata nila, no. Pero ako yung kapangyarihan ng pag-organisa para mas mapalakas yung movement para sa isang pamahalaan na deserve natin, no. And one of the best examples here para sa akin yung Syntax Coalition, no. Sila po yung coalition ng mga health reform advocates, mga cancer survivors, mga patient groups at economic reform advocates na isinulong po yung Universal Health Program, no, para mas magkaroon tayo ng sistemang pangkalusugang pangkalahatan, no, universal healthcare, no. And the way they fund it is to increase taxes on tobacco and alcohol, no. And yung tobacco and alcohol lobbies po, sila yung isa sa mga pinakamakapangyarihan na lobby sa Pilipinas, no. The tobacco industry in the Philippines, if you remember the landmark case Stonehill versus Chok, no, yung isa sa mga ginagawa dati ng mga tobacco companies ay sinusuhulan nga yung mga kongresista para mapababa yung buwis, para everybody happy, no. So the strongest tobacco lobby in Asia, the largest publicly listed food and beverage company in Southeast Asia. And these yung mga mamamayan, ordinaryong mamamayan, patient groups, cancer survivors, economic reform advocates, sabi nila, hindi, we deserve better than this. At gagawa tayo ng isang paraan na tulong-tulong tayo mag-organize para ma-ensure na manalo yung reforma na gusto natin, no. And it ended up winning in 2012 with just a vote, no, with a coalition po that supported as well by then President Aquino, no, the department secretaries who were part of that movement, no. Nagkaroon po ng increase sa budget ng DOH by 2.5 times. Bumaba yung smoking prevalence from 31% noong 2008 hanggang 20% noong 2019 or 18 yata. Umakyat yung health insurance coverage from 50% to 90%. No? Again, the power of the people kapag nag-organisa, na kayang labanan kahit yung mga dating crony ni Mr. Marcos in tobacco and alcohol. By the way, in the Ledesma report, Oscar Ledesma report, nung tinry po nilang alamin, no, kung anong nangyari doon sa suhulan, no, Mr. Marcos daw sa mga nandun sa mga libro, no, ng tobacco companies dati. So ito sa Interesting factoid. And yung final lesson po, and this is where I wrap up, is yung we deserve better. No, ngayon po we are facing isa po sa mga personal kong hugot kung bakit napaka-active ko ay hindi gusto ko, pero dahil kailangan. Yung tatay ko po ay may isang maraming comorbidities at senior po siya. At 2 years ago po, a year ago, na-diagnose po siya ng isang a critical illness. No? At nag-oorganisa po ako hindi lang dahil gusto ko, pero dahil kailangan. No, gusto ko maging ligtas yung tatay ko. At dito po sa lahat ng mga pagsasaliksik namin, nakita ko na hindi enough yung suporta na binibigay ng gobyerno at ng pamahalaan para maprotektahan yung tatay ko. Kaya po gusto talaga naming kumilos. At yung isa po sa mga movements po that came of the COVID-19 pandemic is yung Move as One Coalition po. Kami po ay coalition ng around 140 organizations na ipinaglalaban po at isinusulang isang public transport system na ligtas, makatao at para sa lahat. At dahil po sa collective action ng grupo, ay nakapag-push po tayo ng isang ng halos 26 billion pesos po sa public budget sa 2021 and 2022. Ito po yung highest na nakuha po ng sektor since at least 2010, the last budget that we studied. At dahil po dito sa pagsasama-sama ng iba't ibang sektor, mga siklista, mga labor unions, transport workers unions, persons with disability, climate justice advocates, transport economists, commuter groups, even faith-based groups po, no, and environmental movements, ay kaya niyang mabago ang sistema. No? At yung sistema na kailangan baguhin ay isang pagtingin, no, sa sistema ng mobilidad na nauuna ang kotse. Nauuna ang mga mayamang tao na nasa kotse. Kahit na 5% lang ng households ng Pilipinas yung may kotse. No? At nababago niya po yung sistema ng tinatawag nating car-centric public budgeting. No? Ano po to? Yung since 2010 po yung budget natin para sa road-based infrastructure, 2.8 trillion pesos. Pero 99% po nito ay sa pagpapalawak ng kalsada, para sa kotse. Na alam naman ng maraming ng siyensya, no? And evidence and research na hindi ito yung solusyon sa traffic, hindi ito yung solusyon sa road safety and roads. Kung gusto nating mas maging ligtas yung mga frontliners natin na nagbibisikleta, kailangan nating mag-invest, no, sa ating road-based public transport system tulad ng protected bike lanes, better pedestrian infrastructure, at maglagay ng mga puno, no, para mas maging komportable yung paglalakad at pagpapadyak, at i-improve yung supply ng ating public transport system. So again, another change, no, na nagsimula sa mga maliliit na bagay. Kaya po ngayong People Power Anniversary, ito po yung mga aral na natutunan ko. No? Una, kailangang makiisa. Kahit na may miyembro ng pamilya na sinabi nila nag-benefit sila. No? Pero may mas malawak pa sa pamilya natin yung epekto ng politika. Kailangan nating makinig. Tulad ng paikinig natin siguro makinig po kayo sa lolo ko na may mga kasamahang coconut farmers. No? Ordinaryong mamamayan, may kapangyarihan na maging mismong pagbabago na gusto nilang makita. Kailangan nating mag-organize. At we deserve better. Lalo na ngayong 2022. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Sir Ken. Some points na gusto kong mga sinabi ni Sir Ken is yung mag-organize, no? Parang Sir Ken is pushing for people empowerment, no? Giving value and power sa mga tao talaga to express their voices. Tama po ba, Miss Grace?
Oo. At saka ang ganda din sinabi ni Sir Ken kasi una binanggit niya yung we have the power to lead the change we want to see. So talagang empowerment siya. So lalo na sa mga
Mhm.
kabataan ngayon kasi ang kabataan ng pag-asa ng bayan tapos sila yung sa eleksyon, 'di ba? Na sila talaga yung nangunguna sa eleksyon na talagang tayong lahat. So talagang kailangan empowered citizen ang kailangan.
And yung sabi din niya, change starts from small things, no?
Totoo.
Change nagsisimula sa mga maliliit na bagay.
It takes one
Okay?
person to initiate change.
Yes, tama.
And let our voices be heard. Sobrang na-empower ako doon. Kasi parang yung iba kasi 'di ba parang ay wala namang yung katulad nga ng sinabi ni Sir Ken, wala namang magagawa tayo, walang pag-asa na, ganyan. Parang hopeless na. Pero hindi eh. Lagi lang tayo maniwala at manalig. Kasi papapakinggan at mapapakinggan tayo ng pamahalaan.
Sige. So, I think pupunta na tayo sa pangalawa nating guest for this morning, Miss Grace.
Yes. Let's turn to the floor to Mr. Miguel Martipera.
Okay, magandang umaga. Salamat Ken sa nakabubuhay mong pagtatalakay. Ako, ewan ko kung makakabuhay niyo sa akin, magiging medyo critical ako ngayon, no? Dahil isa ako sa mga kabataan pa ako, na hindi nakaranas ng EDSA. Marami akong frustrations with post-EDSA democracy, tulad ng marami sa ating kababayan. Pero marami tayong frustrations patungkol sa ating sistema ng pamahalaan ngayon, pero i-highlight ko yung isa lang. No? Sa tingin ko, legacy din siya ng People Power Revolution, but at the same time, it's an unfinished legacy. At ano yun? Yung konsepto ng transference of power. Nalipat man ang kapangyarihan mula sa isang diktador tungo sa isang bagong pamahalaan, tingin ko may kulang doon. No? Ang hindi masyadong naitrabaho ay ang paglipat ng kapangyarihan sa isang bagong henerasyon ng mga leader. Dalawang dahilan yan. No? Una, marami sa kabataan ang lumaban sa diktadurya. Ibig sabihin, marami sa mga naging leader dapat ng Pilipinas ngayon ang pinakulong o napatay nung panahon ni Marcos. Sabi nga ng isa kong kaibigan, hindi lang naman pera ang ninakaw ni Marcos, no? Pati yung kinabukasan, no, ng Pilipinas na makapag-produce ng magagaling na leader, nanakaw din niya dahil nga sa diktadurya. No? Pangalawa, siyempre yung ating kaugalian na respeto, minsan ng masyadong pagrespeto sa mga mas makapangyarihan. No? Sa tingin ko, nakikita natin iyon ngayon na lalo na sa panahon ngayon ng internet kung saan napakadali na i-substitute yung sarili nating boses sa mga boses na nakikita natin sa screen o sa telebisyon o sa mga yung influencer nga ika. No? So ano yung hina-highlight ng ganong klaseng paglipat ng kapangyarihan? Una, sa tingin ko, sa yung mundong ginagalawan natin ngayon na hindi natanto ng noong People Power Revolution, yung bilis ng evolusyon ng komunikatibong teknolohiya o more simpler terms, teknolohiya lang. No? Mabagal kasi ang usad ng reforma on the ground. Pero yung paraan natin kung paano tayo nakikipag-usap sa isa't isa, nag-e-evolve siya ng napakabilis, di ba? Hindi naman natin maiisip na makakapag Zoom meeting tayo 10-15 years ago, right? Or even probably hindi naman mga 20 years ago, no? Isip ko kasi parang 2010 pa yata. Hindi na 2022 na pala. Sorry, millennial problem 'yun, no? Yung akala ko 2000s pa lang, 2010s pa lang. Anyway, right? So merong problema diyan. Una, sa tingin ko hindi pa tayo masyadong nakaka-adjust sa pagbabago ng teknolohiya na ito. Hindi pa natin masyadong nahuhulma yung ating approach. Paano ba tayo makakapag-usap ng maayos sa ganito kabilis na espasyo? No? Pangalawa, marami sa atin, mga reformist, mga taong simbahan, ang hindi na maintindihan kung paano nga ba gumagana ang mga teknolohiyang ito. No? We become slaves to the technology without really knowing how it works. So now when we have things like trolling or hacking or even with our economy, no, with transfers of money, it becomes very difficult to understand what's going on. So what that creates are new elites, not just political elites, but technological elites. Okay. So my call for the next generation of leaders, for the new people power, is let's embrace technology. Let's learn how to harness these things. And that's why, for example, a lot of people were sort of confused. Why is the Ateneo Martial Museum a virtual museum? Well, that's one, right? When around 5-7 years ago, 6 years ago, when the Ateneo Martial Museum was founded, its founders had a very forward-looking vision already to engage digital spaces, which a lot of organizations are only starting to do now in the midst of the pandemic. Right? But this is where people are. Right? We're now nasa gitna na tayo ng henerasyon na hindi na talaga masyadong nagbabasa ng dyaryo. No? Na hindi na talaga nanonood ng balita kapag may oras ng balita. Ang pinapanood nilang balita ay galing sa YouTube, sa TikTok, at iba sa Facebook, Instagram, halimbawa. So kung hindi tayo mag-engage sa mga espasyong ito, mahihirapan talaga tayong makipag-usap sa isa't isa tungkol sa mga bagong ideya. Yun yung una. Pangalawa kong frustration with EDSA or with the EDSA generation. Pasintabi na lang po sa mga nakikinig. Pero malaking issue ngayon ang tinatawag na historical revisionism or historical denialism. Bilang isang kabataan, minsan pumipintig yung tenga ko pag ang pinagbibintangan ay parang puro kabataan lamang. Parang ang kabataan ang nakalilimot. Pero may tanong ako, no? Ano nga ba ang relasyon ng alaala, no, sa kapangyarihan? Malaki ang relasyon ng dalawa. Ang lagi kong sagot kapag sinasabi sa akin yun, teka lang, ang kabataan, pwede pang pag-asa pa nga yan kasi nasa eskwelahan pa sila. May pag-asa pa silang turuan kung ano ang tamang kasaysayan. Pero sino ba ang mga taong nasa kapangyarihan? Hindi ang kabataan. At yun ang isang nakakalugmok tungkol sa atin, sa sistema natin sa Pilipinas. The people in power are not the youth. In fact, they're not even, if you would, they're not even part of the EDSA generation. They were even before, no? The EDSA generation. Our president is not, for example, he's been in power, right, for a long time already. Right? Some of our senators are really old. So, revisionism, denialism of our history is not just a product of the youth forgetting. My argument is it's primarily a product of power and the way that our people are being manipulated by those in power from the previous generations. Okay? And part of the solution to that is to give power to young people. Okay? Whether you work in NGOs, whether you work in the church, in the academe, in government, it's time, it's way overdue to for us to elect, to appoint, and to pass the baton to the younger generation. Okay? The ideas of our leaders are still those that do not come from the youth, and that's a huge point of frustration for me. If we're talking about the new people power, it has to be led by young people, okay? Not by, well, in the modern parlance, not by boomers. Sabi ko nga, hindi naman ang mga millennial o ang mga Gen Zers ang may kapangyarihan sa lipunan natin ngayon. Kaya alam mo, yung mga estudyante ko, lagi nilang tanong sa akin, alam mo sir, kapag nakikipag-usap ako sa magulang ko tungkol sa Marcos regime, kunyari, loyalista yung mga magulang nila, they're told to shut up or to simply follow. Kung ganun yung conversation at the dinner table, paano pa kaya yung conversation at the higher levels of discussion of power, where young people are told to shut up, no? So how can we expect systemic change if it's still the old system that runs things? That's my number one. Number two, nabanggit ko kanina, hindi pa tayo nakaka-adjust sa internet age pagdating sa ating communications. No? Malaking dagok ito. It's a huge danger to future social movements. We have to return, or we have to create a social frame, a social community where we can determine paano ba tayo mag-uusap about our political ideas. No? Kasi ngayon ang nakikita ko is a lot of toxicity, a lot of troll-like behavior, not just from systematized trolls, but from everyone, even from ordinary people. And worst of all, even from our own political leaders. Alam mo, ewan ko kung ako lang ba nakakaramdam, parang pag pinapakinggan ko yung mga tumatakbong pangulo ngayon, yung iba sa kanila, parang troll magsalita. So, iniisip ko, mga tumatakbong presidente ito, no? Bakit yung mga spokesperson nila, gano'n? Bakit troll magsalita? Hindi ako nai-inspire na pataasin ang aking ideals kapag nakikinig ako sa kanila. Bakit ganun yung mga leader natin ngayon? Kasi nga, alam nila, ito yung magkakaroon ng reaction, no? O kaya they want to seem like they're part of the masses, pero I think that's a very condescending way of looking at the masses. Lagi kong sinasabi, halimbawa, alam mo, kunyari, diskusyon tungkol sa pag-a-absent sa debate. No? Yung mga tao, pag pinag-uusapan yun, very toxic na yung usapin. Pero ako, pag dinidiscuss yun, sinisimulan ko siya sa, teka lang, ang ordinaryong manggagawa, kapag hindi sumipot sa trabaho yan, mapaparusahan siya. No? Pag late siya sa trabaho niya, mapaparusahan siya. Ako, kung hindi ako umattend sa klase, magre-reklamo ang mga estudyante ko. Isa rin yung frustration ko sa sistema ng pamahalaan natin ngayon. Hindi talaga siya pantay. No? Sabi nga nila, ang Pilipino kulang sa disiplina. Sabi ko sa kanila, teka lang, sino ba talaga ang walang disiplina? Ang mga ordinaryong mamamayan, pumipila sila sa commute, pumapasok kahit na traffic, pumapasok on time. No? Kahit na hindi klaro ang health protocols, pumapasok pa rin tayo sa trabaho. No? Nung nagdi-distribute na ng vaccine, sino ang nagpaturok ng bakuna ng walang FDA approval? Ang ordinaryong mamamayan ba? No? Hindi yata. Sino ang walang disiplina? Kaya sa mga nagsasabi na kailangan natin ng kamay na bakal para magkaroon ulit ng disiplina ang taong bayan, ito ang tanong ko. Bakit makitid ang tingin natin sa konsepto ng disiplina? Bakit kailangan ng kamay na bakal para maging disiplinado? Ang disiplina ay hindi ang pagsunod lamang. No? In fact, ang disiplina ay ang paggawa ng isang sistema kung saan ang lahat ng tao ay pantay-pantay. That's how you create a disciplined society, not by scaring them into submission. No? It's by making people feel that they're part of an equal system so that they can all act the same way. Diba? Kaya lang naman maraming Pilipino, halimbawa, ang hindi sumusunod sa patakaran kasi alam nila may mga hindi talaga sumusunod sa patakaran na mayroong palakasan. Diba? Yun ang kakulangan ng disiplina, yung mga nagpapalakas, hindi ang walang kapangyarihan. So, balik lang sa punto ng walang kapangyarihan, babalik lang ako sa kabataan. Itong revisionismo, kumakalat siya hindi lang sa internet. Tingin ko nga pangalawa lang yun eh. Saan ba talaga kumakalat ang revisionismo? Sa mga taong nagpapataw ng kanilang kasinungalingan sa kabataan. Sana makonsyensya po ang ating older generations, those who are in power. You have to teach the new generations the truth and not spread disinformation for your own agenda. Yung mga magulang, pare, pastor, sana po tama ang itinuturo natin sa ating kabataan. Kaya para sa akin, ang bagong EDSA, youth-led dapat communicative, at dapat talagang youth-led talaga. So, napakasimple lang, yun lang naman ang gusto ko talagang sabihin. Tingin ko mas marami pang diskusyon pag mag-usap na tayong lahat dito sa room ngayon, marami pang pwede mag-bring up. Pero sa ngayon, yun muna ang sasabihin ko. Happy anniversary sa SLB. At maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Sir
Wow,
Migs.
thank you so much, Sir Riggs.
Okay, maganda yung sinabi ni Sir Migs. And ngayon ko lang din na-realize na when Sir Migs said na yung about sa my student na nagsasabi na kung gusto nilang makipag-course about you know the it's or the Marcos regime, parang sinasabing wag, you stop talking. Na-realize kasi of course the parents are supporting the Marcoses, and na-realize ko you are what you support pala talaga, no? Kasi if kung sumusuporta ka ng ganitong tao, so your actions may somehow reflect on what you on the people that you support. So parang yun, kasi 'di ba during the time of martial law, if you are against the Marcoses, pinapatahimik ka, 'di ba? yun parang realization ko lang naman. Sige. Miss Grace?
Na-encourage ako maging critical thinker dahil kay Sir Migs. At saka natuwa ako dun sa bagong definition niya ng disiplina. Hindi yung natatakot talaga ng mga tao, kundi yung system, pantay-pantay lang talaga. Na meron pananagutan, yung talagang natutuwa lang ako.
Kaya nga. So marami tayong questions later, Miss Grace, pero hold on muna natin. And dumako muna tayo sa ating third guest.
Ayan, para sa ating pangatlong panauhin, welcome po natin si Dr. Abinales.
Hi, magandang umaga. Hapon dito the day before sa inyong lahat. Again, mayong hapon magbuntag sa mga Bisaya. So, the problem is I'm Bisayan. I failed Filipino since grade school. I copied my way through high school before I reached UP. So, ipagpauman rin. I'm sorry that I have to talk in English na, pero with a Bisayan accent. So you gave me ako yung pinakamatanda dito I'm out of place. Ako yung lolo ni Ken. But I think the advantage of being all this that you have to marang historic to look at. Just in terms of personal experience, I was a freshman in UP in 1972 when martial law was declared. So on Saturday, meron kaming ROTC military training noon. Marcos declared officially martial law on Thursday, but Kit Tatad came on radio and TV on Saturday. Papunta ko UP noon for ROTC training, and the first group that met us were all these Marines with machine guns and say, "Hoy, umuwi na kayo." So, and then 16 years later, I was crying in EDSA when Marcos went away. It was a very weird experience kasi yun nga, you were trained na the first 15 years, akala mo walang mangyari, di ba? Kaibigan mo pinatay, nahuli, tapos, first attempt at protest namin sa UP in 75, pinakpok kami lahat. And then after that, 72. So it was a struggle. So from our perspective naman, one of the things I probably can share with you is that it's going to be a long haul. Okay, it doesn't happen. Things don't change in a generation. So yeah, I spent my childhood. So 86, I was crying in EDSA and eating on Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's a story I'll tell later. The second thing is this is dark times. So I agree with Megs that these are really hard times. But in fact, dahil dito, I'm inspired by two Marxists actually that I read. One is yung hunchback na communist organizer sa Italy na si Antonio Gramsci. Who said, in these particular times, it's optimism of the will, pessimism of the intellect. Yeah. And the other one is this Marxist historian na si Perry Anderson, who said na it is in these times of retreat that we actually can develop the most sophisticated of explanations. So it's in that spirit na ang ipagka-killjoy as Eeyore ni Winnie the Pooh would come in. Parang, I don't want to complicate next, but this is what happened. Now, this is how I look at things. So first, in question you is, what is the significance of people's power in the electoral political decision of the youth? My answer is none. And the first reason, I have 4 reasons for that. One is that EDSA, as we all remember it today, has never been integrated in the national histories that are being taught to us. Ateneo probably exception, UP exception. But once you go to, say, Cotabato or Batanes, yung kinds of national history textbook, EDSA is absent. Second, merong writings about EDSA, about what happened under Marcos, but these were not written by academics. The best written accounts of martial law and EDSA are by journalists, foreign academics, and public intellectuals. If you ask yourself, ano bang sinulat na textbook ng mga top historians ng Ateneo, UP, Lasal on the Marcos dictatorship and on EDSA? Wala. Okay. Second, whatever came out about EDSA were limited in distribution. Yung pinaka-systematic book on Marcos dictatorship and first years ng EDSA, yung sinulat, inedited ni Oye de Dios, Aurora de Dios, at saka ni late UP professor si Petronilo Daroy, yung Dictatorship and Revolution, na published ng People Power Foundation ni Iggy Apostol. 500 copies lang. Okay? So rare na yan. That's the first one. Second, yung one of the first accounts on the declaration of martial law itself, yung pinpublish ng former columnist na si Conrado de Quiros, I think 100 copies lang. So if you can imagine that a community, an archipelago of 7,100, okay, 500 copies of that book. So you can imagine anong lalabas, the extent to watch people in the province is correct. So that's the first thing. Second is an irony that the EDSA reforms, one of the ironies of EDSA reforms. Ang ginawa ng administration of President Cory Aquino was, one of the things she did was to remove yung Department of Education centralization of the writing of textbooks. Kasi ginamit ito noong panahon ni Marcos, to centralize textbooks. Ang consequence nito is that niliberalize ng Korea government yung pagsusulat ng textbook, and it therefore gave the power to individual schools to collect, to determine anong ituturo. And this opened up opportunities for the Marcoses and their money to help write, to help people who write, to support people who write about national histories na may may bias towards martial law, an opportunity to sell into the schools, no? And so what happened ngayon, sabi ni Manolo Quezon sa isang interview, is that kung tingnan mo yung isang kindergarten textbook on penmanships, one of the sample sentences is, 5-6-year-old is, President Marcos was the best president ever. Okay. So that's one. The third thing, the third thing that you want to think about is, there was not only one EDSA, there were two other EDSAs. EDSA 2, which was the ouster of a very corrupt but popular president, okay? In EDSA 1, the military failed in its coup. In EDSA 2, people power and a military coup succeeded in disposing Arab. Now, the question, however, Arab is, this was also the time that the poor voted, di ba? Kaya merong people power 3, di ba? Yung poor people's power. Now, pag tiningnan mo yan, again, si Manolo Quezon was very important on this. Pag tiningnan mo yung nangyari, EDSA 2, the election of Arab, he may have been corrupt, no? But it was also the poor saying, okay, you want us to play the game of electoral politics, kasi kayo naman middle class at saka Corriesta told us, we will play it. But when you ousted Arab, you broke the rules that you created. Kaya EDSA 3 happened. And this is called Poor People's EDSA. Unfortunately, okay, winners get to write and rewrite history. So revisionism actually started with the people who promoted EDSA 1 and who were in EDSA 2. And that we have to accept. Second, isang nangyari sa EDSA 2 and EDSA 3 was that people then started to say, ordinary people, we played your game, you violated us, you turned the game, you were the first to violate the game. Second, ang nangyayari dito, it's just a musical chair, di ba? There was nothing reformist about it. Nagpalitan lang. And then Gloria Arroyo's rules for 10 years, di ba? So for the people, walang promise everyone. It's the same crooks in power, di ba? Tingnan mo yung na poder ng EDSA 2 and EDSA 2, sabi nyo, ay, pareho lang pala. So, and then when the people protested, pinagbabaril, di ba? By the forces who supported EDSA 2. Second, so musical chair. Second is, while we talk about EDSA 1, this is 1 million in EDSA Quezon City. We do not know what happened to EDSA in the provinces. So may susulat nga ng mga taga Davao na, hoy, sabi ni Father Alejo, for example, may nangyayari naman sa Davao. Okay, pero ano? Diba? What EDSA was in Quezon City and Green Hills, where EDSA replicated all over, and if this were replicated over Cebu, Davao, how is that integrated into the EDSA narrative? Unfortunately, Imperial Manila historians don't think that seriously. Diba? So ngayon, this is 2022, and people who fought in Davao for EDSA 1, for Cory, and for reforms are just starting to tell their stories. No, it's 2022 na ito, ha? So we don't know about that. Okay. The second to the question, then the third, the third, as 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 is that ngayon ang problema natin is that the electoral this generation, the nature of the Filipino electorate has completely changed, diba? Kayo na yan eh. So, sabi nung COMELEC, there are 67 million voters. 31.41 of that, okay, about 35-36% are voters between the ages of 18 and 40. Ibig sabihin, the oldest voter, the 40-year-old, was born in 1982, diba? Was 4-year-old when Marcos fell out of power. So, dala-dala siguro ng mga nanay nila sa EDSA, tapos uwi ng alas 5, patulog na. And 10 years old in 1992, okay. 4-year-old and then 14 years old in 1992, and in 2002, 24-year-olds, okay. And ngayon, and now they're 30 years old in 2012, no? So, the youngest voters were born in 2003. So, ibig sabihin, kayo lang yan at 18 years old, 2010. So, a lot ng explanation regarding this generation is that this generation has the memory of Marcos. True. Or if whatever, or of 𝗧𝗵𝗲, and that whatever memory they have, or whatever they remember or told about 𝗧𝗵𝗲 from TikTok, YouTube, etc. Now, i-add mo yung factor na walang historical textbook, ha? Okay. But this is also one of the what people that say this forget, that these are also generations that did not experience economic crisis. Okay. So, in generation namin si 𝗧𝗵𝗲 went through two crises, di ba? Economic. 1977, when the sugar industry collapsed. In 1983, okay, when it was discovered by, unfortunately, Bobby Tiglao, that the Philippine government had only what, $164 million left in this money kasi ninakaw. Tapos yung isang crony ni Marcos, inabiskapo sa Canada, dala-dala yung ano niya kasi marami utang niya, nag-collapse yung economy. Okay, so that, and then of course when Ninoy Aquino was assassinated, yung economy nag-update, nag-spin, no? Ang generation ngayon never had that. This is a generation where after Aquino, after Ramos, the economy began to grow. Okay, may problems, inequalities, etc. But you guys and your parents never went to the same kind of generation of crisis that I guess people by generation had. So merong weird, on the one hand, merong, because of OFW and BPOs, diba? Patas na, one of the fastest growing economies tayo eh. And one of the interesting things that connects Mrs. Aquino to President Duterte is that yung economic managers nila have the same economic policy. So, ibig sabihin, while people were becoming middle class or expanding income, walang sense na this society is going to collapse. Pero may sense na one of the reasons why the society is not moving forward faster than Singapore is itong mga magnanakaw sa gobyerno, di ba? Di mga corrupt yan. Mga magnanakaw na nakikita namin sa TV. Okay? So that's the fourth question answer. Now, to the second question, why is the counter-narrative of the Marcos popular among this generation? First, was I mentioned, the absence of any history. Second, TikTok. But the other thing that people tend to forget is the Marcoses were one of the first to appreciate social media. Okay? Si Gemma Mendoza ng Rappler wrote in 2019, di ba? How the Marcoses were using money to promote media. So 19, 20. In last 3 years ago, si Gemma Mendoza already warned about this, but nobody was listening. Okay? And so that's this account, for example, why palaki ng influence ng mga Marcoses, starting with the fact, di ba, that when 𝗖𝗎𝗍 ran for Senate, she got 30% of the vote. And sabi ni Manolo Quezon sa akin, sa interview niya, is that is the minimum percentage that you need to win Senate, and 9 points more you add, you become president. 39% lang ang kailangan for anyone to win presidency. So that's the first thing. Second, nag-collapse yung traditional media, di ba? How many, one of the things that happens sa emergence ng internet is yung printed newspapers began to collapse, di ba? And actually, napapansin mo na 1980, di pa kayo pinanganak, but one of the things, if you look at bakit naging popular ang Abante, yung mga tabloids, di ba? Yung Abante, sexy, yung pare, nag-sauna, patay, di ba? Yung nababasa mo sa dyaryo. For a time in the 1990s, this actually, tingnan mo yung parent company nila. The parent company nila are the prominent newspapers. And this Abante, all these tabloids were the ones sustaining the so-called respectable newspapers. Kasi yun ang binabasa, di ba? And it gets complicated by the fact that most of our newspapers write in English. Hindi Taglish, hindi street language, di ba? Okay, so isang factor yan. And it's worse nung dumating na yung internet. And one of the high point nito is the closure of ABS-CBN. Okay. Tapos consistent attacks on media, whatever is left of media by the government. May binanggit lang si Megs that really got me interested. Idadagdag ko lang ito ng konti. And the role of technology. No? Babalikan ito mamaya. Actually, tama si Megs na yung changes in technology really impact people. And it goes back to 1896, di ba? 1860 pala, when Rizal wrote the novel. For the first time, a novel was being read. Okay? So radical yan. One of the radical impacts is Katipunan kasi suddenly Bonifacio and his friends started reading a new form of technology which tells them the history of Spanish colonialism. The second one is the radio. Okay? For the first time, halimbawa, sa Indonesia, halimbawa, how did the Indonesians coalesce into one nation? It was radio. They never saw their leaders. They heard their leaders. Yeah. So radio is another technology. The third one was actually computers. Yeah, yung malaking computer. Suddenly, hindi ka na kailangan. The other one is photocopy machine. In the 1980s, in the 1970s, Marcos was so strong. It was, had complete control over censorship. And then the first Xerox machines arrived. Nagkaroon ng Xerox revolution. So anong binadala sa Ateneo at UP ng mga galing sa US na critical of Marcos, sini-Xerox by the 2 days after, nasa PAL, nasa Cagayan de Oro na. That's technology, no? And then of course, computers. And then in the 1980s, for the first time, napapakinggan ng mga Bisaya na kagaya ko, yung Magandang Gabi Bayan, it's the nationalization of TV. Which completely changed things. So, halimbawa, one of the weird things that you will notice now is yung mga Islamic terrorists, yung mga kidnappers na Abu Sayyaf, they didn't speak in Tausug or Bisayan, they spoke in Tagalog. Like, completely unimaginable when I was in a freshman. Okay, so yun. Okay, so the third question, is there a new collective understanding of the 1986 revolution that more accurately defines the sentiments of the Filipinos today? Again, sorry, no, walang history. But the other interesting thing that you might want to think about is that anong impact ng remittances ng OFW na tatay at nanay ninyo on how much you sell your votes. Diba? So, nagdaw ako ng survey ng mga kaibigan ko sa Mindanao. Sabi ko, magkano na ba? How much is your vote worth now? Sabi nila, well, in 2006, 2,000, ngayon 5,000 na. And you're talking about small cities here. Yung nagtanong rin ako sa Pansol, sa Quezon City, sabi nyo, 5,000 din. So the purchasing power, diba, as a result of remittances, speculation ko lang muna ito, is that has made it possible for the Filipino voter to say, dagdagan nyo naman yung bayad ko. Diba? And you go that. And there's one thing that's interesting ngayon, this kinds of voter, is dahil people move faster, libre na yung Cebu Pacific, mas mura, and people go abroad, 5,000 a day. Yung kind of social relationship that keep them together, naglulusen. So nagiging this is a sad thing, mas nagiging mapili and mercenary ang Filipino voter. Diba? I have money from my tito from Saudi Arabia, tapos wala na akong connection sa bayan ko, sa 𝗬𝗲𝗎. Teka, I can move around. Diba? May impact ito. The third thing is the inability of our political and intellectual elite to understand that if they make the argument that political dynasties are important, this is not new. Okay. In 1987, yung historian na si Rizal Mujares from Cebu wrote in his essay on the Osmeñas in the book The Anarchy of Families that in 11 May 1987, out of the 200 members of the new House of Representatives, a year after EDSA, 130 belonged to the so-called traditional families. So ngayon, sabi ni Professor Ronald Mendoza sa Ateneo government law na robust dynasties na ito. The two problems that you face is that we don't know what these dynasties are because our intellectual and our academic elite rarely go outside. And second, books like The Anarchy of the Families have not been integrated in any book, in any course on history and politics in a systematic fashion. Okay. So, final point. Okay. Ito naman, marami naman bad news. Okay. So, how should civil society commemorate people's power moving forward? the big problem that new civil society groups and your generation need to do is to remove the current stories of 𝗧𝗏, which I describe as dull and boring, because it's written by the literati. Okay, and academic, political, spiritual writings are extremely devoid of passion and emotion. Basahin niyo yung nasa opinion pieces on 𝗧𝗏. They're the most boring pieces in the world, di ba? Because they're written by people who think in English, okay, and who think that what we should emphasize is the justice question. Okay. One example, for example, so academic writings have removed the passion on 𝗧𝗏 and the emotion. Okay. Read any writings on the academics on 𝗧𝗏, there's no even such thing as "Putang ina mo, Marcos." Okay. Second, it is disconnected from its secular and non-spiritual thoughts by church intellectuals. Diba? 𝗧𝗏 was a miracle. No, it was not. It was a series of mistakes. Okay, there was nothing spiritual about it. Yeah, it's spiritual. The tongues are gonna run me over. God, I gotta get ready because I'm going to hell or heaven. No, but most church writing emphasize the spiritual. Sorry, I'm an atheist, so I can say anything. Third, yung civil society account naman ng 𝗧𝗏, masyadong moralistic, di ba? Na tayo, here comes democracy, etc. No, and really was trying to seize power, di ba? When Cory, wrote, declared, swore as president, if you look at the people around her, there was not a single member of civil society in that forum. Okay, and the first thing that if you read the accounts of Angel Stuart Santiago on 𝗧𝗏, yung blow by blow account niya, one of the things are missing are the stories of the poor. Okay, and then fifth, 𝗧𝗏 now is distorted by politicians. Okay, supported by the speechwriter. Think of the memoir of Enrile, di ba? Written by ghostwritten or help written by a former radical, si Nelson Navarro. Okay, think of what people are writing now about mali naman yung 𝗧𝗏. Okay, na distort kasi nobody researched on that. And then, number 6, these distortions, this moralism, this high and mighty spiritualism and miracles, and these boring academic pieces are further problematized by simplistic talks by media people and so in social media and on forums like ANC. Diba? Ano tingin mo sa 𝗧𝗏? I have 30 minutes to say that. Okay. And then finally, okay, what has happened with 𝗧𝗏 is that once the government institutionalize a popular movement, it becomes very boring because it joins the ranks of the tedious annual institutional rituals like flag ceremonies, university graduation, National Heroes Day, and the most vulgar of all, Holy Week, where instead of going to church, we all go to Boracay. Naging institutionalized. Once you institutionalize a very chaotic, fascinating movement, it becomes boring. Diba? So what do I think this new people power, you young generation, should do? Okay. I think you should return to the people. Okay. There were 1 million people in 𝗧𝗏. Who has written about 𝗧𝗏? Writers, intellectuals. None. There is no story. There is no oral history of 𝗧𝗏 involving those 1 million people. And among those 1 million people, one of the things being there, one of the things I love to notice is how funny and vulgar 𝗧𝗏 was. Okay, I mean, if you just listen, for example, to the relatives of then General Cadyar, the head of the Marines, who was about to march, to move his tanks to attack the rebels at Camp Crame. Yung radyo lang is that the relatives are saying, "Hoy, Temyong, huwag ka na nandito yung nanay mo. Huwag ka na bumaba." So the image that hit these guys are not there. Yung isa pang there's yung si Angel Santiago has a lot of this. One of the things I really enjoyed the most was 5 o'clock in the morning kami on February 24. Mga taga-UP kami, wala kami mga pera, di ba? Kasi sa dorm lang. So may nagbalita na, hoy, yung may cook in cans na at saka Kentucky Fried Chicken, nagiging test case tayo. So sabi naman, dito na tayo. We can combine fighting for democracy with the fact that we can be the first, to taste Kentucky Fried Chicken and Coke. Alas 5 na umaga, nandun kami sa Santolan, sigarilyo na lang, and then the Marines started to attack. You can hear the Marines with their car, like 5 o'clock in the morning, tear gas coming, and you can hear when they whack their, ito yung anti-riot police, when they whack their shells, it's really scary at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, in a very smoggy Manila in Santolan Avenue Road. Okay. So ito naman tayo UP, sabi, ano gagawin natin, di ba? Siguro mga 20 lang kami noon. Dahil taga-UP kami and we're experienced in being attacked by the police, ang gagawin, okay, babatuhin natin sila, tapos atras tayo because we have to fight another day. We will not win this. But this is what funny saying, when we're about to do that, there's 4 Koleanas from Assumption, I think, ang bango, mga mestiza showed up and said, Nako, let's make 𝗘𝗗𝗦𝗔 in defense of democracy and for Ninoy and Cory. Sabi na, mamamatay tayo nito. Okay, ma'am, Marines po yan, galing Mindanao, papatayan tayo. No, because we are for Ninoy, if we are Christ. Sabi ko sa mga kaibigan ko, mamatay na tayo dito. So sabi ng isa, sino marunong mag-Hail Mary dito? Mga taga-UP ito, mga demonyo, di ba? Sabi, sino marunong mag-Hail Mary? Sabi na isang fratman, ako marunong mag-Hail Mary. So it was really a funny episode where you are about to die, and you are a veteran of street battles, and you have these 4 women who've never been to a street battle, believing that Cory was there, telling you, let's make 𝗘𝗵𝗲 because we will convince the Marines not to, put their bayonets into our stomachs. So ang consuelo ni Bobo ko lang at the time is that, okay, papatayin na kami dito, at least I go to heaven with these 4 beautiful women. So those kinds of stories have disappeared. Are not part of the tradition. And these are stories of ordinary people. That these kinds of writings and interpretations of 𝗖𝗄𝗏 that you read and listen today have erased. Okay. So therefore, my suggestion is we should return to the oral narrative of 𝗖𝗄𝗏, which means you guys sit down with Lolo and Lola and ask them what happened, di ba? Kasi those will never, and with social media now, pwede mo ma-preserve at saka magamit yan to challenge all official narratives pro and anti-Marcos. So yun lang ang suggestion ko siguro. And to actually do that, you not only have family dinners, but also yung mga tagayan, di ba? Nagtatagayan pa kayo, di ba? Nag-iiliman pa kayo, di ba? So ang tagayan is not, the wonderful thing about tagayan is that unlike the Americans here, yung Americans just binge drinking lang. Sa tagayan, it can last for 3 days, di ba? And the conversations are there. When I tell you in 1983-84, one of my most memorable moments talking about listening to the masses is sa kanto ng Katipunan at Aurora Boulevard bago naging gentrified ngayon. There used to be a stall for taxi drivers run by this mother and 3 of our daughters. So if you remember, I don't know if you know him, one of my best friends, si Lian Alejandro, we would go there at 11 o'clock in the evening, and we would listen to the taxi drivers. And they don't shout at each other, they debate. And interesting in debate because it ranges from human rights violation to the shape of Imelda Marcos's legs, to the existence of God. So I think I may be populist here, but never underestimate the ability for people to tell their stories and remember it. I think for your generation, the first thing you do is to discard all the things that you've read and just start talking to ordinary people. And those 10 million, that 1 million people who went to 𝗖𝗄𝗏 to defend a bunch of coup plotters and prevent the Marines from attacking, and then oust Marcos, he was shitting in his pants, will be able to tell their stories. And that is where the optimism and hope of 𝗖𝗄𝗏 will come from. Sorry, thank you. Yun lang.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc Abidanes.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you sa ating mga speakers, no? Then, as in sobrang dami kong natutunan and parang na shaken yung dati kong paniniwala about the EDSA and even yung interpretation ko of what happened in EDSA. And marami tayong tanong even in the social media, and we will acknowledge them one by one later on. Miss Grace, may masasabi ka ba sa nasabi na present sa atin ni Doc Abinanes?
Oo nga, natuwa ako kay Dr. Abinares kasi nga, syempre siya yung may first-hand experience ng martial law. Tapos, na-explain niya sa atin kanina, yung talaga experience niya, napaliwanag niya, tapos nakakatuwa lang makarinig ng mga ganung narratives nga. So, natuwa ako dun sa sinabi nga niya na dapat talaga tayo magkaroon na ng parang oral narrative sa tayo mga kabataan. Tanungin natin yung mga lolo't lola natin, tanungin natin yung mga nakatanda na naka-experience noon para magkaroon din tayo ng maganda, rounded perspective.
Doc, parang medyo hindi clear yung pagsabi ni Miss Grace na yung sinabi niya, ikaw yung may first-hand experience. Parang may ibang meaning yung ano. Parang may ibang meaning yung sinasabi ni, ikaw yung may first-hand. Hindi pala. Hindi pala yung ano mo.
Hindi pala yung... Parang, siya yung parang, di ba tayo, medyo millennials na. So, siya talaga yung naka-experience ng panahon na yun.
Oo nga. So marami tayong tanong.
I really is that when Filipinos protest, we protest with laughter.
Yes.
And that's
I agree.
It's account ngayon. That's what makes them boring. The disappearance of rebellious laughter in a very momentous event.
Yes, tama po, Doc. Actually, maraming tanong sa ating Facebook pages and even ako mismo. And I think I'll start this open forum with this question po. And this is addressed to anyone, and you can answer briefly, concise lang para at least hindi naman makuha natin yung oras and dwell on just one particular question, no. But my question is this: marami kasi tayong na-mention kanina of the frustrations, no, frustrations of post EDSA. Now let's just say post EDSA after or post people power. Marami tayong frustration, marami tayong mga what ifs ito yung nangyari. But is it right to say that the failure of post EDSA is the product of people power? Kasi maraming nagsasabi na kung wala sanang EDSA, wala sanang people power, wala sanang sana mababa yung presyo ng mga bilihin. Kung wala sanang EDSA, ito sana maganda sana yung buhay. And that's a famous narratives of many people nowadays na parang they are attributing the failures of EDSA. They are attributing the failures of post EDSA to people power revolution. And what's your thought about this po? Sir Ken, Sir Migs, or Doc Binales, any one of you can respond to it po.
Mauna ako. Jumping off from what Dr. Binales said, EDSA is not, it's a very specific solution to a specific problem. It's not the solution to everything. One of my colleagues said, EDSA was only a political space. It's not the answer to everything. So we cannot expect, for example, a political event like that to have profound, let's say, economic effects immediately, no? Kasi that's part of the false narrative of trying to sort of distort history by putting up too much expectations on what EDSA was able to do. Kasi ewan ko, I might be castigated here, pero what EDSA is for me, for example, is an example that there is a limitation to what the Filipino people can take with regard to abuse of power. Lately, it seems like medyo humahaba-haba pa yung pasensya natin doon. Pero the lesson for our political class is there is a limitation. And there's this sort of merong friction na nangyayari, di ba? Our political leaders, they keep on pushing our buttons, see how far we can go and take in terms of corruption and abuse. And then when they see that limit, they sort of re-strategize. No? That's now very difficult to do now kasi as I said before, yung mismong paraan natin ng komunikasyon ng mga ideya, pati yun nagagalaw na. So ang hirap na tuloy magkaroon ng ganong klaseng diskusyon kung ano yung limitasyon natin bilang isang taong bayan. No? So kung ganun yung expectation natin sa EDSA, sabi nga Dr. Abitales, we have to sort of relearn some aspects of it. No? For example, something that I don't see highlighted a lot are two things. One, it to me also changed the calculation of political change, at least not just even in the Philippines, but also around our neighbors. Because for a long time, the calculus of political change was you have to add violence to the equation. What EDSA showed was that might not be true all of the time. Right? So that's a big change in the calculus of political change. Okay, and then second, when you look at the effects of the EDSA revolution, it also keeps your elites on their toes. Kasi now they don't know really what to expect. Kasi lahat na ng pwedeng mangyari within your elite political class nangyari ng EDSA. May intra-elite betrayal, popular support, intervention ng church, so on and so forth. So it changed a lot of the calculus, no? For better or for worse. As Dr. Abinali said, later on in EDSA 2, the same people sort of violated that covenant na we have to stick with the democratic system, right? So, but that is only a political tool, a political space. It's not the end all be all. Kasi frustration ko rin yan. Halimbawa, marami sa atin ang iniisip ang eleksyon ang solusyon sa problema ng Pilipinas. Hindi yon. Kahit nga sa civil society, alam mo, frustration ko yan na even in civil society, for some reason, elections end up being the last battleground, the ultimate battleground, when it shouldn't be. No? It should only be confirmatory. Are we okay with the past few years or not? Pero hindi, yun na yung nagiging labanan mismo ng polisiya. No? Hindi yung kung ano yung nangyari sa pagitan ng election. Kaya, yeah, we have to relearn a lot of what we know about EDSA.
Thank you, Sir Migs. And actually, I agree with your statements na minsan we focus more on the politicians, kumbaga, na parang yung mga nangyayari is we attributed it kasi yung mga mga politiko ganito ganyan post EDSA rather. Pero and during elections din parang I agree with you na kahit mismong mga church organizations in their actions of doing the voters education is parang short term kumbaga na sinasabi lang natin okay ito yung dapat nating criteria, something like that, pero hindi natin pinapakinggan yung mga tao kung ano bang nasa isip nila, and we are not empowering them. So yun parang then also follow up question po, tama ba na I mean what is the contribution of the people naman, no? What is the contribution of the people sa mga frustrations na experience natin in EDSA? Kasi sabi ko nga minsan we just focus on those people who are in power. Pero what about the people, yung mga tao, ordinary people? Ano bang naging contribution? Minsan kasi hugas kamay lang tayo na kung si Doc Ban maghunaw lang ba Doc? No, dili lang dawat o kanang kaugalingon nga sayop. So what's our contribution to the post EDSA frustrations?
Because you never told the story of our people. The people who wrote about EDSA forgotten that. There's one interesting thing of how the masses were important, no? So after Marcos fell in February 25, EDSA was full of cash. Kasi maraming tumira, di ba? Merong Kentucky Fried Chicken, marami talaga, ang dumi-dumi talaga ng EDSA the day before. Nanawagan, ewan ko sino nanawagan, na pumunta naman kay si EDSA para linisin ang EDSA. Remarkable. It was the poor who went back to clean 𝗧𝗏, while the middle class and the elites went back to their air-conditioned homes. That is what the power of the poor can do. But that's not written, because it's the middle class and the elite that thinks that they have the full knowledge of 𝗧𝗏. So those kinds of things ba are forgotten, And in fact, halimbawa, kung rallyista ka sa panahon ni Marcos, the always assumption is kung sino ba yung nasa unahan ng rally mo. Hindi yung mga leaders na nakikita mo sa litrato. No, yung unang nasa unahan are the workers and the peasants. Kasi yung matatapang yun. Yun yung magpo-protect once the police starts attacking para yung mga personalities makaka-atras. But nobody talks about that. Everybody talks about, Senator so-and-so or Mr. so-and-so resisting the police. No, it is ordinary people. Ning 84 halimbawa, nag-rally kami sa I'm going memory lane nito, but to give you an idea of how the poor, the unrecognized Pinoy play a fake factor. When the police started attacking, guess who was our first defenders? And first defenders were not only the workers who were backing, pushing the police back, but also yung mga neighborhoods. Tinitirador yung mga police. Tinatago kami. So these kinds of stories have never been told. Kaya, so the poor said, okay, we will be happy not to tell that story. We will vote. Boto naman si 𝗍𝗏. Inimberto niya naman si 𝗍𝗏. Anong gagawin namin? And that's why if you look at why Duterte is successful in his anti-elite messages, because there are a lot of people who had memories of 𝗧𝗏 who said we were there, but our stories have never been told. And that's one of the biggest tragedies of this democratic outburst, which I hope you guys can recover. Tandaan naman.
Oh, yan, Sir Ken, gumawa ka na daw ng libro. Sabi ni Doc.
I mean,
it's
Ateneo
really,
Museum Canada, diba? Ateneo Museum Canada.
Kasi, that's a good thing of going to the internet, Sir Migs, di ba? Na accessible na ngayon yung mga materials for the people to have. Kasi if we just rely on physical copies of these things, medyo mahirapan tayo, which Dr. Abinales told us na yung production of materials before was hard, no? And until now nga parang yun.
Yes, pero at the same time, part of the problem then is there are so many sources. It becomes difficult to find easily, make it accessible, and that's part of the work of the Ateneo Martial Museum. Actually, ako tamad, syempre medyo tamad din naman ako. So kung mag-google ka, gusto mo nasa isang page na lahat Sana meron gano'n at tinatrabaho natin yan, Kasi for example, recently I was in conversation with some people from the Bangsamoro, and that is one of their frustrations, Ang daming accounts, the burning of Holo, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 massacre, etc. Pero kalat. Nasaan na yung consolidated? Sabi ko, sige, kailangan trabahuhin yung mga ganyan. Kasi ang simple lang, di ba? Alam niyo, yung accounts nandiyan na, kailangan lang talagang kolektahin. Pinapasimple ko lang, pero napakahirap na trabaho nun. Parang pinapasimple ako yata mo siya. Pero, di ba, conceptually, it's so easy. Part of the impact of the Ateneo Martial Museum from the past few years with the previous directors, it's just in one place. That's already such a huge impact. Academicians, they tend to think once they publish yun na yun. But yun nga sabi ko, ang simple ng ginawa ng AMLM, nilagay lang sa isang website, biglang nag-increase yung impact. So, some of the calculus of the problems are quite simple conceptually if you really think about it. And part of that is the consolidation of materials.
And I think your generation has it kasi your social media skills are unprecedented. And this is very important, especially if you go to the provinces. Ba? Manila protesters, academics, blah, 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 right. But once you go out into the provinces, oral yan. Okay? In 2008, I interviewed this imam in a squatter area in Jan Santos. Imam, he was one of the 200 people, MNLF guerrillas, who were sent to Libya to train in anti-tank warfare. But nobody talks to him about it. Kasi oral, he never writes about it. So he's this guy who said, well, I didn't know, I was taken out of my village and I was told, punta tayong Sabat, tapos bigyan kita ng passport, Indonesian ka, do not open your mouth. The next day, he was in Kuala Lumpur, never been abroad. Then the day after, he was in Pakistan. And then sabi niya, dumating kami sa Libya, tapos magdating namin doon, ang init-init. Tapos anong ginawa niyo? Nag-train kami, itong East German, special anti-tank specialist na hinar ni Gaddafi, was training us. Sabi niya, sino kasama mo? Sabi niya, Irish, mga Timorese, mga Thai. Sabi niya, and sabi ko, so like in a week before, you were in your small village north of Cotabato. And then in 5 days after, you were in Libya being trained in sophisticated anti-tank warfare by an East German specialist. That story is not there. It's his story, oral yun. Because nobody writes that, because the history of the Moro Rebellion in 75, there are only 2 accounts, or 3 accounts maybe. The journalist, I think the ones that Marites Betog and Glenda Gloria wrote. There's 2 academics, 1 Malaysian and 1 American, si Tamakina and Normiswari. Okay. So until now, halimbawa, the war in 1975 that basically spelled the end of Marcos. Because Marcos was spending 1 million a day trying to contain the MNLF. Okay. Has not been written. But sabi ng pinsan ko, was a lieutenant in that time. Sabi niya yung the rebels were supplied from guns toilet paper by Libya. So we wala tayo niyan, di ba, Megs? But if you go to the provinces, upuan mo yung imam. Sabi, kwento mo nga yung nangyari sa buhay mo. O nga, nasa Libya na ako. And it's brought back to the Ateneo Museum. Think of the impact it would have on young Muslims listening about their history. Di ba? And it's fantastic.
Dagdagan ko lang kasi balik ko lang sa diskusyon natin na hindi sir, tama kasi tayo we're playing catch up with these things eh. Alam nyo yung Facebook halimbawa has been ever since its inception has been long used to distribute patronage. For example, no? Sa isip ng maraming progresibo, yung patronage kinakalat pa rin pag kakatok ka sa opisina ng politiko. Ngayon hindi na eh, PPM mo na lang eh.
PM sent.
No, hindi lang live seller ang nagsasabing PM is the key, pati mga politiko na ngayon, PM is the key na sila ngayon. I mean, tapos ngayon tayo yung nag-a-adjust tuloy ngayon. No? We have to stop playing catch up. No? Kailangan naman mag-ano tayo kasi 'di ba yung isipin mo yung bayad for vote buying GCash o ba? Come on. I mean tapos tayo we're still discussing hey let's put it on the website. Napag-iwan. It's very frustrating talaga. Pero sabi nga ni Chito Gascon, pound the rock, 'di ba? Parang sige lang, trabaho pa, kaya natin 'yan.
And I think your generation is smarter than ours. Masabi kayo. So.
Miss Gracious, you have a question?
Ano naman po kaya yung mga privileges na na-enjoy natin ngayon na hindi natin na-enjoy pre-people power?
Isa lang yung radio noon. Limited pa yung di ba? Pangalawa, just to give you an idea, di ba? Yung mga Marines were, sent by Marcos, by General Ver to go, part of the Marine contingent of the Red Blood to EDSA. They were all from Zamboanga. They were familiar in fighting communists. So sabi ng commander lang, ng mga komunista sa Manila, punta tayo doon. And then they get this meat, this beautiful Colialas and Madre. Grabe yung but nobody alerted them. Diba? Pero if you notice yung impact ng isang radio na yon, on how it really changed the calculus of that time. Grabe. it messed up yung plans ni Marcos. That's one radio that si John Kitley was that. So tama si Meg, that importante ang technology ito. And compared to us, you guys was grabe yung mag-PPM lang kayo, di ba? TikTok and everything. Hindi ko na maintindihan yung anak ko, pero di ba? Ang bilis eh.
Actually, Doc Abinales, when Miss Grace asked that question, naisip ko rin na even posting on social media was not freely posting your ideas, thoughts in social media was not a privilege during EDSA time. I mean, we put it in the context of EDSA. Pag meron kang sasabihin, parang maghunos-dili ka if sasabihin mo ito or hindi. Compared now on Facebook, parang kahit problemang mag-asawa, ipopost mo lang sa Facebook.
Yeah,
kahit yung problemang magkapitbahay, magmarites, ipopost mo sa Facebook. But during the time of martial law, I mean, I don't know if I'm correct, if I'm wrong. Can you testify to me na nagagawa ba ito during the time of martial law or not? I mean, not just in the context of Facebook, but yung pag-express ng opinion mo, kumbaga.
One of the things I learned as a sophomore sa UP is to forget people's names. And until now, I cannot remember your names. Kasi habit yun. Kasi ang premise nun is that pag nahuli at tinorture ka, hindi mo alam yung mga pangalan. So yun yung, as activists nun, that was one of the things that was pounded on us. Remember people's faces, but never forget their names. So even ngayon, what? 46, I'm 66 now, I was 18 then. It's still a habit of me to not remember names. I will remember faces, but names of places, faces and streets. Names of people and streets. See the principle.
So ngayon po talagang yung freedom, sobrang
yeah,
free
you have no idea what you can do.
Kaya lang yun
na. Si Rick can interview MNLF guerrillas, di ba?
So dapat talaga maging cautious in terms of using our freedom.
Yeah. Pero tama si Meg, the other side was ahead. And I remember the first one to appreciate the value of media, si Duterte. Yung kanyang sa Davao, yung gikan sa masa tungo sa masa na program niya, where he, every Sunday he talks for 9 hours and courses at everybody. In 1990, people fell in love with it. Hindi na nakikinig sa misa sa on TV or sa Protestant ministry, bigong na naghihintay. And he actually captured that kasi his handlers realized that national television has become nationalized. So I think, you guys are smarter, so you can kaya niyo to.
During that time po, parang curious lang po din po ako, ano ba yung tingin sa atin ng international world, ng buong mundo?
From 72 to 80? Wala, kasi wala namang censor. We don't know anything about the world. 78, 79, naggigera na pala sa Mindanao, walang nakakaalam. The only thing you notice, batayin mo yung novel ni Danton Remoto, is sa mga probinsya, may inuuwi na body bags. And nobody knows, bakit namatay si ganyan, may body bag. And even sa Mindanao where I grew up, yung first, what we noticed, I live across Lanao del Sur, yung mga body bags, saan magaling to? And nobody's written about it. And then, mga naka-PTSD kasi, di ba, yung pag hindi ka nagpunta ng college nung panahon na yon, you go to the army. Ang dami nagka-PTSD but nobody knew what it was. So yun yung is that I think with TV, because people now write on YouTube, record themselves on YouTube and TikTok, the database na makakuha nyo, sabi ni Meg, contrary, maraming differences, merong contradictions, may even lies and all that. But yung database is so wide enough that if you present it in a way that an ordinary Filipino can think about it and make the decisions, it's much, much better than in the era of EDSA 1.
Sir Migs, curious po ako dun sa Martial Law Museum website. Yung mga viewers po, meron po ba kayong tally nun? Kasi dun malalaman din po kung interested yung mga tao, yung parang mga ganun po.
We have sustained interest we can definitely do more. Right now, ang ginagawa ko kasi, without going into the details, is I'm trying to capacitate not just the museum but our academic communities to really embrace popularization. Usually kasi ang pagtingin natin sa popularization, pagpapababaw, hindi naman ganun 'yun, no? O kaya gagawin dapat entertaining daw. Hindi ganun ang popularization. There's a very definite way that you're able to do that without being patronizing towards your audience. So we're trying to convince and work with people who actually know how to do these things, and sort of introduce them to the academic community who's infamously stubborn. Pero dagdagan ko yung sagot ni Dr. Abinales. Siguro hindi niya ito masasagot kasi nga ako, I'll answer sa Catholic ha. One of the lessons of 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I think, as a Catholic, as a member of the church, is how important, for better or for worse, there might be disagreement here, the church is in politics, or specifically in our work with the poor. No? And should I say this in a SLB forum? I think medyo nagpo-pull out dun yung simbahan in the sense na yung pastoral guidance minsan hindi na tinatamaan yung political issues. In the post-cardinal sin church, there are reasons for that, right? Pero ang problema kasi diyan kapag sa kapangyarihan, kapag may umatras, merong papasok diyan na hindi necessarily ang interes ay reforma, na hindi necessarily ang interes ay mga progresibong ideya, no? Yung simbahan, lalo na nung since nagkakatapatan na naman tayo, lalo na nung post-RH law debates, nakita ko napaka-drastic nung biglang pag-pull out sa social and political spaces in terms of leadership. Siyempre, on the ground, the church is still very much involved, no? With BECs and all that. But in terms of, larger or more ideational leadership that has been ceded to other forces. So I hope the church will discern, because the times now are tough. In other words, perfect storm eh. May pandemya ka na, may possible return ka pa ng Marcoses halimbawa. Kung ang simbahan ay titimpi lang, such a huge missed opportunity, I think, for the church to really take that leadership. Because the 85% of voters are Roman Catholic. I'm not saying that the church should endorse. I know how difficult that is. But it should take leadership in some of these conversations that are happening right now, institutionally. So that's one of the lessons that we got from 𝗧𝗵𝗲 that I think is a bit disappearing today, that I think we should remind people that, hey, the church plays a big role in informing the minds of our people. They should
And
not
that
see that.
just during election, Sir Migs, tama?
Exactly, yes. No?
Kasi, I mean, it's, minsan yung socio-political na discussions within the church circle is just parang dun lang nagpipik during that time of election. Pero what do we ano ba yung pinag-usapan natin socio-politically involved pag walang election? Yun yung question mark ko sa
Pa talaga mag-iisa at involved tayo everyday, intentional.
I think Sir Ken merong may dagdag doon.
Opo. Siguro po mag-add lang doon sa reflections ng ano yung pwedeng gawin before and after elections. Kasi super agree ako kay Doc Abinales siya, kay Migs. Napakahalaga ng pag-claim ng espasyo na yun. At mahalaga yung pakikiisa nga sa ating mga kasama, lalo na dun sa mga tinatawag nating problem owners. So yung tingin kasi natin sa reforma, yung mga elite lang, yung mga mayayaman, yung may access lang doon sa congressman or sa senator, yung kayang uh, magsulong ng pagbabago. Pero actually yung ipinapakita nga na effective way of organizing is dapat makisama. Dapat kasama mo yung mga union, kasama mo yung mga nanay ng mga 4Ps. Magbibigay lang po siguro ako ng halimbawa dito. Nung pinupush po namin nung 2020 yung mas maayos na pag-track ng budget. Nag-start po kaming mag-organize kasama yung mga people's organizations. So dati po ako nasa gobyerno rin, tapos nagsa-staff po ako sa national budget. Yung isa sa mga espasyo na nakita ko na sa tingin ko parang bakit yung mga mayayaman lang yun nandito ay yung mismong pagbuo ng budget. At may mga barriers to it eh. Yun nga kulang ka ng connect or hindi maintindihan kasi parang masyadong technical naman yung budget. Pero actually dun po natin nakita na hindi naman siya kailangan ganyan kakomplikado. So yung ginagawa po namin ngayon, bumuo kami ng tinatawag naming People's Budget Coalition. Mga 10 po yung mga CSOs na kasama dito. Kasama yung mga parent leaders ng Samahan ng mga Nagkakaisang Pamilyang Pantawid, yung mga urban poor leaders, yung mga labor unions, may mga healthcare workers unions na kasama kami, kahit business organizations kasama namin. Pero essentially po, nagsasama-sama kami na para isulong doon sa gobyerno na, we actually need 1.1 trillion pesos in social, health, economic support, labor support, and even environmental support para magkaroon ng equitable recovery sa COVID-19. Pero kaya yung 5 trillion nga yung budget. So, yung ginagawa po namin every year, lagi kami may bagong natututunan doon sa proseso at patuloy lang po namin pinapalawak yung espasyo na yon. So, you know, the budget process as a space that people can enter kasi buwis natin yun at pera natin yun at may karapatan tayo at responsibilidad tayo na isulong yung maayos na paggamit ng buwis natin. So parang that's one idea that we're currently doing every year. So budget natin to. So yung pangalawa po, yung imagination ng kung paano tayo makakapag-participate dun sa accountability work. No, so doon sa trabaho ng pananagutan. Kasi hindi lang nga sa election dapat managot yung mga politiko. Kailangan doon sa mismong pagbili nila ng mga goods and services ng mga para sa publiko. So yung isa po naming binubuo na idea ngayon, what if magkaroon tayo ng parang procurement integrity movement na similar to NAMFREL? No, yung idea na we can watch receipts. No, tingnan natin yung resibo as much as we fight for our election returns, no, during the elections. So sa tingin po namin kaya siyang magawa. We've spent the past 2 years just piloting ideas. Yung isa nga po sa mga ideas na na-pilot namin, inaral po namin around 20 billion pesos worth of COVID contracts. Around 5 billion of that we can analyze. Pero yung nakita po namin doon, government could have saved around 500 million pesos if these goods had been bought at typical prices, around 10% in savings. So we proved it with a smaller sample. Tapos ngayon yung work is, paano siya pasimplehin para yung ordinaryong mamamayan kayang makapagsabi, I also watched the receipts. No? I also took part in that accountability work. So super agree po ako doon. The work of the new type of people power is creating more of these spaces in between elections to say, I as a citizen can participate. So yun po yung mga tinatry naming buuin ng mga espasyo.
Thank you, Sir Ken. No? Actually, yung binabanggit ni Sir Ken, yung accountability, yung pakikinig sa mga tao, yung we go to these different organizations. It's really important kasi doon natin malalaman kung ano ba talaga gusto ng mga tao and we just don't stop during the elections, di ba? And fortunately, let's go to the second part. I mean, to the next part. Before that, pakinggan muna natin yung mga shoutouts ng mga tao, no? Pakinggan natin yung mga shoutouts, yung mga comments ng mga tao dito sa ating Facebook pages, no? At from 𝗖𝗍𝗄 watching, we have here from Manila Cathedral School Batch 2008, no? From Mount Carmel High School, Rosario ADS. So, basically po yung mga nanonood sa atin ngayon are 𝗖𝗍𝗄 schools and from Rappler and Radyo Katipunan subscribers natin. Maraming salamat po sa pagsubaybay sa ating anniversary episode. And may shout out din si Sir Migs, I think.
Nanonood sa atin si Professor Mary Reselis. Hello, Prof. Mary. Sir Arjan, my colleagues at the 𝗘𝗗𝗦𝗔. Shout out na rin kay John Jungkook.
Okay, so thank you everyone, no, for watching our special episode, and I hope that you shared also this video to everyone. Then for those wondering kung ano kayang pwede nating gawin in this upcoming elections, ano kayang pwede nating gawin in order to engage with the people, no? Nasabi kanina ni Sir Abinales, ni Doc Abinales, ni Sir Migs, ni Sir Ken na importanteng mapakinggan natin kung ano man ang nasa isip at nasa puso ng mga mamamayang Pilipino. And yung Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan po ay may ibabahagi at may isi-share sa inyong platform na tinatawag nating Kwentuhang Bayan. And panoorin po natin yung short video na ito. Ayun, sa ika-36 na anibersaryo ng aming organisasyon, ipinakilala namin ang aming flagship program na Kwentuhang Bayan. Ayun, ibalik ang bayan sa sentro ng usapan. Pwede po tayong mag-request ng kopya ng Kwentuhang Bayan Manual sa ating website na www.slb.ph/kwentuhangbayan. So yung kwentuhan po natin ay may U, no? KU, tapos Kwentuhang Bayan. Bakit Kwentuhang Bayan? Kasi sinasabi ko kanina, we focus on the people, not just on the politicians. Pinapakinggan natin kung ano ang hinanaing ng mga tao, pinapakinggan natin kung ano bang nakikita nilang problema at binibigyan natin sila ng pagkakataon na maipabahagi sa kapwa nilang Pilipino kung ano man ang gusto nilang mangyari para sa ating bansa. So yun po. As a parting question for everyone sa ating mga guests, but before that, thank you po sa pagtanggap ng aming invitation to be here in Kwentuhang Bayan dito sa Radyo Katipunan, special episode natin. And our parting question is, Miss Grace?
Ano po ulit sa inyong palagay ang bagong people power?
For just one or two sentences, ano ang bagong people power? Magsimula tayo. Doc, saan tayo magsimula? Sa pinaka, or sa pinakabata? Sa bata na muna, sa bata.
Sa bata, matanda na, para bata.
Sige.
Bagong people power kayo. Yun lang.
Wow, kaikli na sinabi ni Sco. Pero makahuli
Ang bagong people power ay kayo. Tayo.
Challenges, pero kayo, diba? Yung people power started with 10 people showing at Camp Aguinaldo, di ba? Bringing food, and then kayo.
It's both inspiring and challenging, Doc. Ipopost kayo na maya, ang bagong people power ay tayo. How about po si Sir Migs?
Just remember na all movements start with young people. Rizal, di ba? Yung mga nag-FQS, gano'n. It's always people like you. So, kami, we're all, archaic na kami. Jurassic. Okay,
But
sorry.
but of course, we always look up to
Yes.
those who are in the
Yeah. Don't trust us though because we failed. Okay? Do not trust us because we failed. So
Maybe we should learn from you. Diba?
as negative example.
I think it's both negative and positive.
Lesson
no?
learned.
Yes.
Don't be diplomatic.
Okay, how about si Sir Migs po?
Mahirap yun. Alam nyo, napaisip ako sa tanong eh. Kasi, lalo na nung sumagot si Ken, may narinig nga ako galing sa isang forum. Alam nyo, hindi ba tayo nagtataka? Hirap na hirap tayong makakuha ng ayuda galing sa Bayanihan 2. Pero, mas magaling pa yung mga nagdi-distribute ng pang-vote buying kaysa sa Bayanihan 2. No? Nakakainis na may ganito yung uri ng sistemang political natin na yung perang galing sa nakaw, yun pa ang madaling ipumudmud sa ating lahat. No? Kaya sana, para sa akin, ang bagong people power talaga ay we really just deserve a better government. No? And we really deserve better leaders than this. And no one can make that possible except for young people, actually. I was going to say everybody, but I'll be a bit cynical. Young people, no? Tayo talagang kabataan. Gas-gas na pero totoo eh. Kaya nga gas-gas eh. Kasi totoo talaga. No? So para sa akin, ang bagong people power. 35 below. Talagang binigyan ng age lang. Sige na nga, 40 below na. Ayan.
Thank you po. How about Sir Ken po?
Ayan, nakapagsulat ako. So, ang bagong people power, dagdagan ko yung sinabi ni Doc Abinales at ni Mix. Ang bagong people power ay tayo na nananampalataya at tumataya para sa maayos na pamamahala.
Ang galing.
Siguro yung nakikilahok tayo dun sa mas malawak na proseso, hindi lang dun sa electoral politics or change in leadership, but to really live it out. And there are so many creative ways to engage in the process. I guess yung lesson take away from people power is, yung unwavering faith in the power of the Filipino people to do better and to demand better.
Agree.
Thank you so much, Sir Ken. Grabe. Diyan, sobrang ang dami kong natutunan ngayong araw na to. Ang galing ng speakers natin.
Thank you po, Sir Ken, Sir Migs, and Doc Abinales for your time and sharing your knowledge and your
and for inspiring
expertise.
us.
Inspiring
Salamat
us.
din. Glad I could help. Happy anniversary.
Thank you, everyone. So, for those who want to watch more episodes of Kwentuhang Bayan dito sa Radyo Katipunan, just subscribe, like Radyo Katipunan or Simbahang Lingkod ng Bayan sa ating mga Facebook pages. So muli, ako po si 𝗏𝗏𝗏 at
ako po si Gracious Romero,
ang inyong host for today. Maraming salamat and happy anniversary 𝗬𝗏, happy anniversary SLB.
SLB. Thank you.